How do you do? I would first like to thank York Circle for giving me this opportunity to meet so many people who are interested in continuing to learn. And this is a great opportunity. Now, I have to warn you, first of all. I have been studying, theorizing, and writing about argument for over 40 years. And in the half hour or so I have today, I can't give you all the answers, okay? So when Hutch said, "I'll teach you how to win an argument," he was exaggerating just a little bit. I do, however, have a book by that title, and you can get it on Amazon or Indigo. Okay, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about 3 different aspects of argument. And those aspects I call the 3 pillars of argument, okay? And first of all, when we talk about argument, we can do it in different ways. The first way we do it is when we talk about an argument as a thing, an object. You make an argument. And when we make an argument like that, it has bits and pieces. And when it has bits and pieces, we can take them apart. You read an editorial and you notice the argument in it. You read a letter to the editor and you see that it has an argument in it. And maybe if you took critical reasoning when you were in school, you know that arguments have premises and conclusions, claims and reasons. And that's true, and it's great. And however, that's not my forte. My forte is arguing. When people are arguing, they are doing something interactive. They are creating a process, and that's what I care about. I happen to believe, and I confess I have no scientific evidence for this, that when we change our minds, it's usually, or more often than not, in interactive situations. So, arguing, therefore, is a social activity. It requires one or more people, and it requires the belief that we are disagreeing. So you and I will be arguing when we think, when we believe we're disagreeing, right? Notice I say think or believe, because some of the times when we're arguing, we're not really in disagreement. We just think we are. And that's part of what I do in coalescent argumentation, by beginning to think about agreement rather than disagreement. So the other thing that happens in argument is we can do it for different purposes. When we argue, we have different reasons for arguing. We can be trying to solve a problem or make a decision. Should we extend the hours of our business on Sunday? Is it worthwhile? If we don't, will we lose business? If we do, what happens to our families? So when we make these decisions, we often argue. And we don't always have to argue in a conflictual way. We might be business partners, and we might be seriously trying to consider the ways in which we can improve our business, but at the same time not ruin our home lives, okay? We also sometimes want to persuade. I want to persuade someone to put more money into the business. So I have a point that I'm trying to get them to reach. So, while all these purposes are different, they also have some essentials in common. And these are our 3 pillars: context, audience, and ethos, right? This is one aspect of the whole scheme of argument, and I want to talk about this particular aspect today for several reasons. First of all, it's manageable. Secondly, it's something that you can take away and use right away, okay? So, these are 3 aspects, and they go from the broadest to the narrowest. The first one we're going to talk about is context, okay? And context is something that goes from very, very wide to narrow. Language and culture. You cannot argue with someone if you only speak English and they only speak Greek. Just not going to happen, right? Different cultures also have different styles. How many people here are from a culture where it is inappropriate to argue? Okay? Okay? What about inappropriate to argue with someone older than you? Okay? A lot more hands go up. And indeed, okay, how many of you are from a culture in which it's rude not to argue? Okay? I'm Jewish, okay? And not only am I Jewish, I'm Brooklyn Jewish. So you cannot get more Jewish than that, okay? In my culture, if you don't argue with someone, you're not treating them with respect. You're not taking what they said seriously. Okay? On the other hand, my Asian students tell me that they would never dream of arguing with a parent or a grandparent. It's just not done. Okay? So one of the things we have to pay attention to is the largest sense of context, which is culture and language. We move a little bit closer, and we have different places. Okay? We have work. We can be at work. We can be at play. We could be at home. We could be at the university. We can be in court, the office, a pub, or a kitchen. My students argue with me differently than they argue with their friends. And they argue with their parents differently than they argue with me. Right? I always teach my philosophy students to be careful how they use their argumentative tools at home. Not everybody likes to be disagreed with all the time. And they learn that the hard way. So context can go from broad to narrower. Where are we in terms of physical location? Whose territory is it? Are we in your home territory, or are we in my home territory? Is it my office, my kitchen, your living room? Right? All of these things influence how we are going to behave and how we're going to feel. The setting can be formal or informal. Look at the situation we have here right now. I'm standing up here in front of you, right? I have the magic clicker. I'm speaking, I've been introduced as an expert. That creates a context. So if someone asks me a question and I say, well, no, I don't think so, then I'm probably not going to get too much flack back. If my wife were here, it would be different. And one of the things that you have to understand is that meanings only happen in context. There's no sense that a word has that is not determined by its context. I like to tell a story of someone who has a presentation to do at school, or perhaps a presentation at work. And they wake up in the morning and they look out the window and there's 6 feet of snow out there. And the roads are closed and no one's going anywhere. And the person says, oh, great. Right? Is that person happy or sad? You can't tell. You can't tell. Right? She could be saying, oh, great, now I've got another week to be tense about this. Or she'd be, oh, great, I've got another week to work on it. We don't know unless we can be there, hear the tone of voice, know the person, and know what's going on. Okay? Let me give you an example of that.
Dude. 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 Dude.
Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to add audience. We've got context, we've got our location, we've got our culture, we've got our setting, and now we're going to go to audience. The audience is the person or people who you are arguing with. Where are you and who are you? What are the power relationships? There are always power relationships. Is it a boss or manager, an employee, a family member, a friend, an acquaintance? What is the relationship? And audience also in gender. Who are you arguing with? What are the gender relationships? Is it a woman talking with another woman? A man talking to another man? Or a woman and a man talking to each other? The dynamics of these different situations are very different. Women argue, or excuse me, women never argue, they only discuss. Women, men argue, women discuss. I know. But somehow the men are never right. I don't know. Now, don't tell the Toronto Star I said that, please. Get a York version of David Gilmour is all we need. It complicates. Gender relations are complicated. And we grow up, most theorists would agree, learning different styles of communication if we are men or women. One example, classic example, is that when women are listening to a story or an argument, they'll go, uh-huh, yeah, uh-huh, okay. And what they're doing when they do that, it's called phatic utterances. What they're doing when they do that is saying, I'm listening, continue, I'm listening, I hear you. Okay? When a man does the same thing, he's saying, I agree, that's good, I accept that, that's good. So when a man and a woman have this, and she says, well, no, I don't think we will buy that car. He says, but wait a minute, you were just agreeing with me. And she says, no, I wasn't agreeing with you. What are we talking about? So we have these differences, and those are differences we have to pay attention to as well. The other thing is familiars. Familiars is a term I use to indicate those people with whom we regularly interact. Here's an interesting fact. Most of the people you argue with are people with whom you will argue again. Rarely do you have an argument with someone and you're never going to argue with them again. Not that it doesn't happen. You know, you may want to get your tire fixed in Kappa's casing and someone's giving you a hard time. But generally, and this is such an important point, we argue with people who we are familiar with. People we'll argue with again, and people whose opinion we care about. When there is an ongoing relationship, we cannot throw caution to the wind. When you're arguing with a coworker, there are limits to how far you're going to go. Why? Because you have to live with that person. Right? If you throw a hissy fit, that's going to undermine your relationship, and that is no good. And the people who we argue with have beliefs. They believe that we are here, that York's a good place, that education is good, all of these things that we share. And there are common beliefs. There are common beliefs that help us get started. If we don't believe anything in common, we cannot get a foothold on argumentation. And I said that I can't give you everything about coalescent argumentation, but one of the keys to it is to keep going back until you find agreement and then move forward in the argument until you have to disagree. Because we think we have to disagree more often than we do. Right? So these common beliefs, which are sometimes called loci, are things like education is good, we have responsibilities to our families, I take care of my children, and so on. When I say it's okay to pay taxes, I don't mean that we like it, but we understand that it's part of being a citizen. And that's why audiences also share values. If we don't have values in common, then we can't argue. If we don't agree on anything, if we don't believe that one should be nice to children, and someone disagrees with that, where do we go from there? That's so fundamental, that's so basic, that we don't know how to get started. We get stuck. So we can have all of these different beliefs, from very broad ones to something like gender equality is an important goal, or gender is more flexible than sex. So we need to have a minimal agreement. In order to argue, there has to be some overlap of beliefs and values. There has to be some degree to which we share these things. And if we don't, then there's nothing to talk about. We have nothing in common. How can we get started? And that's the problem with audience. If you don't share something with your audience, if you don't have a minimum of beliefs and values that you share, then the argument will not go anywhere. So one of the things you want to do in an argument is find those commonalities. And when you find those commonalities, that's your starting point. Okay. Now, so we've gone from, I really wanted to have these graphics done in inside circles, but I couldn't figure out how to do it, so it didn't work. Because we're going down, what we're doing is we're going down from the very, very broadest sense, which is context, culture, and so on, to audience, which is a bit narrower. It's right there and then the person you're talking to. And now we're going to talk about something called ethos. And ethos is your opinion of your partner, your idea of her reputation, what you think about her, okay? And everyone has, fancy word, you can use this now, take this home, let everybody know you went to York Circle. Everyone has an ethodic rating, okay? So if someone messes you up, you say, I've just lowered your ethodic rating, that's it. You're in trouble. So the ethodic rating someone has is your sense of their reputation, okay? And everyone has an ethodic rating. And normally, when you meet someone you don't know, you begin with a more or less, I say usually positive to neutral. I mean, yes, it's possible that you can meet someone and take an instant dislike, but that's less usual than meeting someone and being open to who they are. If you don't do that, then we consider that you're cynical. On the other hand, if you give everybody a very high ethodic rating in first meet, then you're gullible. Okay, and ethos changes. Ethos changes over time. It can be your history with a person. And because of that, their ethodic rating can go up or down. It's a sliding scale. And the interactions that you have with them, the way in which your history, your immediate history, your longer history changes, affects this, okay? So someone who disappoints you, a friend who you quite trusted, sure, come and sit down right here if you like. That's okay. A friend who you quite trusted suddenly lets you down several times in a row. says I'm going to meet you somewhere and doesn't and has no valid excuse, that person will go down in your orthotic rating. Your trust level in that person will decrease. Also, the person who you work with, who always gets things done late and tends to be sloppy, suddenly starts performing at a higher level and keeps it up. So what do? You change your idea of them. You say, okay, well, all right, let's see. Maybe something's happened here. So these are the changes that occur, and they occur to you as well. You also have an orthotic rating. And the interesting thing is that we all care what people think about us. We all care how our colleagues, of course our family, our friends, our associates, their doctor, your accountant, what their opinion of us is. We care about that, right? So that means that the opinion of others is going to limit your actions. People who really don't care about others are considered ill, or at least obnoxious. And one of the things about, a person who really doesn't care about anybody else is a sociopath, right? And one of the difficulties with autism spectrum disorder, a very serious condition, is that the people who have it have difficulty relating to other people and understanding and caring about their feelings. And we consider that a disorder, right? So this is serious, right? Why won't you, your friend who usually drives you to the airport when you go on vacation, says, no, I can't take you this time, right? Why don't you flatten his tires? Huh? Or why don't you hold your breath and kick and have a tantrum? Huh? Not only is it funny when we think about it, but notice how it never even crosses your mind. It's not that you won't do it, it's that it's inconceivable. Why? Because you know that would destroy the relationship that you have. That he or she would no longer think of you as an intelligent, stable friend. So ethos and context work together. There are contexts, cultures in which you're going to appear some way, certain behaviors. And also, if you're at a party, you want to be witty and charming. In a pub, fun and friendly. At work, serious and earnest. At home, loving and considerate. Okay? Now, you might have different choices for these and different emphases, but generally, you can see what I'm getting at. So, ethos and audience is your audience influences how you behave. The fact that your friend takes you to the airport, right, and it is your friend means that you're not going to give her a hard time if one time she can't. At a party, when you meet acquaintances, you'll be friendly, but you might be a little guarded, waiting to learn more about the person, waiting to have some information with which to assess them. In a pub with friends, you're probably relaxed, right? You're trusting. You're not expecting anything bad to happen. If something does, if a friend who you regularly have a great time with says something acerbic or mean, you're probably going to ask them what's wrong because they're acting out of character. And that may mean that something happened to them that day, maybe something bad at work, maybe a relationship issue, right? And you're going to inquire because you know who they are. At work, you want to appear cooperative and interested, and in home, supportive and involved. At least I hope for all these things. Okay, so where is this taking us? Where is this taking us? Arguments are governed by rules. And here, remember at the beginning, I said that there are different kinds there are arguments and arguing, right? Well, here's a real argument. Arguing is a social activity. All social activities are governed by rules. So arguing is governed by rules. It's a classic syllogism. Okay? The only thing you have to accept is that arguing is a social activity, and I don't see anything controversial there, and that all social activities are governed by rules. And we do. That's what separates us from the animals. It's why we don't do everything that's natural. We contain ourselves. We control ourselves. Most of what we do is not governed by explicit laws, but by social rules. And what keeps us connected to those rules, right, is ethos, audience, and context. Rules emerge through the limitations imposed on us by those three things. My Asian students always tell me that they will never argue with an elder, right? In my culture, that's not the difference. My grandpa taught me how to argue. And that context has different rules. And we know, for example, I imagine it still happens, that people who are going to different countries will sometimes be trained by professionals about how to behave in that country. Why? Because you have to understand the context. So our location in the universe, from culture to exact physical location, limits what we can do. We're going to come to questions soon. And when we do, and someone starts, this young lady is going to start asking a question, let's say, this gentleman is not going to stand up and say, no, it's my turn. Why? Because we have rules about that. Thank goodness. The people we are with and their circumstances organize what we will say and how we will say it. Sure, there are times when talking and everything is chaotic. If you've ever seen the movie Annie Hall and the comparison between the Midwestern family and the Brooklyn family having dinner, that's a wonderful, classic difference. I was the Brooklyn family. And the goals that we worry about, the ones that have to do with your own ethodic rating, are called face goals. They're goals that have to do with how you appear, with how you maintain the relationship. So while we're arguing, while we're trying to get what we want or solve a problem, we're also juggling our relationship, because those goals are always there as well. When a student comes to me to make a pitch for a higher grade, right, she's going to be constrained by who I am and the position I have over her. So she's not going to push too hard, because if she does, I'm liable to get annoyed and she could suffer, unconsciously, of course. So, argument is communication, right? We argue in order to accomplish a number of different things. The apparent goal that you think you have, getting to the airport, getting to Ray's, opening for extended hours on Sunday, is just one goal. That's the goal you have in your mind, right? I suggest if you move back from that goal and think more in terms of, I have a problem, I have to get to the airport, rather than, I want you to take me to the airport, that you're opening up more possibilities to find solutions in a cooperative way. So our emotional and personal relationships are often at least as important as that goal. And this is why context, audience, and ethos are so essential. It controls us, and it focuses us, and it lets us know what we can and can't do. So I want you to use it when you're in an argument. Consider how the context is defining the interaction. What's limiting you? Think about how your immediate audience is forming your message. Who you are talking to is making a difference in what you say. When you're talking to your doctor, you're talking to someone who, regardless of how close you are with them, I'm very friendly with my doctor, I've had him for years, regardless of how close you are with them, he still is in a position of authority over me because he knows a heck of a lot more what he's talking about than I do when it comes to medicine. Okay? And be aware of the way you want to be thought of as part of what you're doing. What I'm suggesting is that as you become aware of these aspects, your attunement to the subtleties of argument will improve. And that's for the good. So, that's how you rely on the 3 pillars. Sorry. There you go. Right? That's how you can use them. Okay? And the other thing is coming in the spring. There will be a book coming out by me called Arguing with People. It'll be out by Broadview Press, and it includes what I've told you today and goes way beyond it. I think you might enjoy it if you cared enough to come to this session. And I do have a book called How to Win an Argument as well, which you might enjoy. Okay. Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun.